My ex used to say, all men are cheaters. Ironically, she was cheating on her husband with me. In the end, her husband and I became friends and served her the divorce papers baked inside a cake. I'm 31. About 2 years ago, I started seeing Lena, 29. We met through mutual friends at a networking event. She was sharp, funny in a biting way, and had this intense confidence that pulled people in. She also made it very clear from day one that she was married. Not separated. Married. Her exact line the first night we talked for more than 5 minutes was, all men are cheaters. It's basically biology. She said it casually, like she was stating a weather fact. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other at group outings. She'd make little digs about her husband, how he was predictable, how he didn't challenge her, how men are weak. Every time she said something like that, she'd look directly at me, like she was testing something. Eventually, she started texting me. It shifted fast from sarcastic banter to late-night confessions about how trapped she felt. She told me her husband was emotionally distant, that he worked too much, that he probably cheated anyway because all men do. That line again. Here's where I know I messed up. I didn't shut it down. I justified it by telling myself she was probably already halfway out of her marriage. She kept insisting they were basically roommates. No intimacy. No real connection. She painted herself as the bored, misunderstood wife stuck with a mediocre man. She also had this way of being weirdly hostile about men in general. If I disagreed with her on anything, she'd smirk and say, see? Proving my point. It should have been a red flag. It was more like a parade. 3 months in, she kissed me in her car after dinner. She told me her husband wouldn't even notice. That was the moment I officially became the other guy. At the time, I thought I was winning something. I had no idea I was walking straight into something much stranger. The affair settled into a routine faster than I expected. That probably says more about me than I'd like. Lena was organized about it. That's the part that still bothers me. She had a system. Her husband traveled twice a month for work. On those weeks, she'd suddenly become available. On the weeks he was home, we'd meet during her yoga classes or client dinners. She said it like she was scheduling dentist appointments. What stood out wasn't the secrecy. It was her attitude. She didn't act guilty. She acted smug. Anytime I asked if she felt bad, she'd roll her eyes and say, he'd do it if he had the chance. I'm just not naive. If I pressed further, she'd snap back with, don't get soft on me. You're a man too. It was always that same narrative. Men cheat. Men lie. Men are predictable. According to her, she was just beating her husband to the punch. Here's the thing. I never once saw evidence that he was cheating. I didn't know the guy personally, but from what she showed me, he looked normal. Pictures from vacations. Birthday posts. He commented things like proud of you and love you. It didn't scream villain. When I pointed that out once, she got cold. Not angry. Cold. She said, you don't know him like I do. He's calculated. Men like him just hide it better. That was the first time I felt a flicker of discomfort, because it sounded less like evidence and more like projection. But I ignored it. I told myself she must know something I didn't. I also won't pretend I wasn't benefiting. She was attentive, intense, almost competitive about keeping my interest. If I mentioned another woman casually, even a coworker, she'd go quiet and then double down with affection later. She'd also make little comments about how I was different, how I was smarter, more self-aware. Not like my husband. I thought I was the exception to her rule. I wasn't. Things shifted about 6 months in. Up until then, Lena had framed everything as temporary. She'd say she was evaluating options or waiting for the right timing. I didn't push. I figured if she was unhappy enough to risk an affair, the marriage was already on life support. Then she started talking about him differently. Not with anger. With strategy. She began asking weirdly specific questions about finances. What did I think about prenups? How assets get divided? If I believed emotional neglect counted in divorce court. She claimed it was hypothetical, but the tone wasn't. One night after we were together, she was scrolling through her phone and casually said, if I ever left him, I'd make sure I didn't walk away with nothing. I built that life too. That sentence stuck with me. I asked her directly if she planned to tell him about us. She laughed. Actually laughed. Why would I give him that leverage? She said. He'd try to play victim. It was the first time I realized I wasn't part of some tragic love story. I was leverage. Insurance. A contingency plan. Still, I didn't leave. What finally rattled me wasn't guilt. It was something smaller. She accidentally called me by her husband's name. It wasn't during an argument. It wasn't tense. It slipped out casually. She corrected herself immediately and blamed stress. But I saw the flicker of irritation on her face, not embarrassment. Like I had inconvenienced her by noticing. After that, I started paying attention. She'd complain about him for hours, but the moment he texted, her tone softened. She'd send him heart emojis. She'd coordinate dinner plans. She never sounded trapped. She sounded practiced. And then one afternoon, completely out of nowhere, she said something that made my stomach drop. She said, "If he ever found out, I'd just tell him you manipulated me." She smiled when she said it, like it was clever. That was the first time I considered that I might not be the only one being played. After that comment about manipulating the story, I started creating distance. Not dramatically. I didn't confront her right away. I just observed. Lena noticed almost immediately. She was hyper-aware of shifts. If I took longer to reply, she'd send a follow-up text asking if I was bored of her. If I declined to meet because I had plans, she'd make a snide remark about loyalty. The irony never seemed to occur to her. One night, she was venting again about her husband. She said he had asked her why she seemed distracted lately. Instead of fear, she sounded annoyed. "He's starting to pay attention," she said. "It's irritating." I asked what she meant. "He's being extra nice. Cooking dinner. Asking about my day. It's fake." I remember thinking that most people would see that as effort. She saw it as interference. That's when I asked a question I probably should have asked months earlier. I said, "If he really is cheating like you believe, wouldn't you want proof before blowing up your marriage?" She got defensive fast. Her voice sharpened. "I don't need proof. I know how men operate." There it was again. The blanket rule that excused everything she did. But what really unsettled me was how she talked about outcomes. She started mentioning timelines. If she left, it would be on her terms. She'd control the narrative. She even joked once that she'd make sure he looked unstable if things got ugly. She said it lightly, but there was calculation underneath. I realized something uncomfortable. If she was willing to rewrite reality about her husband, she could rewrite it about me just as easily. That thought stuck with me. A week later, something happened that changed the entire direction of this story. Her husband called me. Not by accident. Not angry. Calm. When I say her husband called me, I need to clarify something. I had never met him. Never spoken to him. I didn't even know how he got my number. It was a Tuesday evening. I was at home, halfway through making dinner, when my phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost ignored it. I picked up out of reflex. He introduced himself calmly. First name only. Said he believed I knew his wife. There was no yelling. No threats. Just a steady voice. My first instinct was to deny everything. Lena had already planted that script in my head. If caught, I manipulated her. I pursued her. She was vulnerable. I almost defaulted to it. But he cut through that hesitation. He said he wasn't calling to fight. He just wanted the truth. He said he had seen messages. Not everything, but enough. He had screenshots. That detail mattered. Screenshots meant proof, not suspicion. I asked him what he wanted from me. He said he wanted to understand how long it had been going on and whether she had told me anything about him that I should hear directly. That phrasing threw me. It wasn't accusatory. It was measured. So I told him the timeline. 6 months. I told him she had said they were basically roommates. That she believed he was cheating. That she felt neglected. There was a long pause. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said they had been in couples therapy for 4 months because she had accused him of being emotionally unavailable. He said he had rearranged his travel schedule to be home more. He said he had full access to his phone and had offered transparency repeatedly. He said she refused to look. That was the moment the narrative started to crack completely, because what he described didn't match the villain she had painted. He ended the call by saying he wasn't going to confront her that night. He wanted to verify everything first. He thanked me for being honest. Thanked me. After we hung up, I realized something uncomfortable. We might have both been in a relationship with the same person, just different versions of her. After that call, I didn't contact Lena for 2 days. She noticed immediately. The first night, she sent a casual message asking if I was busy. I didn't respond. The next morning, she sent a passive-aggressive follow-up about how disappearing was immature. By that evening, she was asking if I was seeing someone else. It was almost impressive how quickly she defaulted to suspicion. Meanwhile, her husband and I exchanged a few more messages. Nothing dramatic. Just facts. He sent screenshots of conversations where she accused him of infidelity with zero evidence. He showed me therapy appointment confirmations, calendar adjustments he had made to be home more often. Everything was organized, transparent. He wasn't defensive. He seemed tired. At one point, he asked me something simple. Had she ever said she loved you? That question hit harder than I expected, because the answer was no. Not once. She said I was exciting, different, smarter than him, but never that word. I told him the truth. He responded with something that reframed everything. He said she had started calling him predictable around the same time she began accusing him of cheating. He said it felt like she was trying to manufacture distance. Manufacture. That word stuck. We both started comparing timelines. When she told me he was distant, he was actually attending therapy with her. When she told him she felt unsupported, she was meeting me. The pattern wasn't messy. It was strategic. At some point during one of our conversations, I realized we weren't acting like rivals. We were piecing together data. Then he said something that surprised me even more than the initial call. He said he didn't want revenge. He wanted clarity, and he wanted to make sure she couldn't spin this into something it wasn't. I agreed, because if she was willing to claim I manipulated her, I needed protection too. That's when the idea started forming. Not emotional, not explosive, structured. The idea wasn't mine alone. It started with a simple observation from him. He said she cared deeply about appearances, about optics, about control. I agreed immediately. Every interaction I'd had with her revolved around narrative. She didn't just tell stories. She engineered them. If someone disagreed with her version of events, she reframed until she won. So we decided that if this was going to end, it had to be airtight. No shouting match. No dramatic confrontation where she could cry, flip the script, and accuse either of us of coercion or harassment. He met me in person a week later. Neutral public place. Coffee shop in the afternoon. I expected tension. It wasn't there. He was composed. Not cold. Just steady. Late 30s. Corporate job. Looked like someone who had been sleeping poorly but still functioning. We laid everything out on the table. Messages. Dates. Screenshots. He had access to phone records through their shared account. The overlaps were undeniable. He wasn't interested in attacking me. He asked one direct question. Did she ever say she was filing for divorce? I told him no. She always framed it as maybe. Eventually. On her terms. He nodded like that confirmed something. Then he told me something else. He had already consulted a lawyer. Not impulsively. Quietly. 2 weeks before calling me. Apparently, he had suspected something for months. Not specifically me. Just that something was off. He had hired a private investigator briefly. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to confirm she was meeting someone regularly. That someone was me. He said the investigator's report was clean. Dates. Times. Locations. No exaggeration. I felt embarrassed hearing it laid out that way. Clinical. But instead of hostility, he said something almost detached. He said he didn't want to give her a performance. He wanted to give her paperwork. And that's when the cake came up. Not as a joke. As strategy. The cake wasn't about humiliation. That's important. It was about containment. He explained it this way. If he simply confronted her privately, she would escalate. Cry. Accuse him of invading her privacy. Possibly accuse me of coercion. Possibly claim emotional abuse. He had seen her rewrite smaller conflicts before. He didn't want this turning into a spectacle where she controlled the script. So he planned something structured and documented. Her birthday was coming up. She had already told me she wanted a small dinner at their house with a few close friends and co-workers. Appearances, again. Curated guest list. Polished image. He told me he was going to go forward with it as planned. I asked what my role was supposed to be. He said, none publicly. The cake was ordered from a bakery she liked. Inside the box, beneath the removable cake board, his lawyer placed the divorce papers in a sealed envelope. Clean. Official. Filed and ready. He made sure everything was legal. The papers were signed by him and notarized. All that remained was service. His lawyer confirmed that presenting them directly in person in front of witnesses was acceptable in our jurisdiction. It wasn't theatrical. It was strategic. Witnesses meant no rewriting later. I won't lie. I hesitated. Not because I cared about her reaction, but because I didn't want to be part of a stunt. He clarified something then. I wasn't required to be there. In fact, it was better if I wasn't. My involvement ended with honesty and documentation. That felt fair. On the day of the dinner, I stayed home. Phone on silent. I had already ended things with Lena 2 days prior. Brief and direct. I told her I knew the truth about her husband, and I was stepping out permanently. She tried to pivot immediately, saying he was manipulating me. It didn't work. Around 8 p.m., her husband texted me one word. Delivered. No details. No drama. Just that. An hour later, My phone exploded with messages from Lena. Accusations. Rage. Claims that I had conspired against her. Which, technically, I had. But not in the way she thought. Her messages came in waves. First anger. Then denial. Then blame. She said I betrayed her. Said I twisted everything she confided in me. Claimed her husband must have manipulated me with selective evidence. Within 20 minutes, she had rewritten the entire 6 months into a story where she was emotionally vulnerable and I had taken advantage. It was almost impressive how fast she shifted. I didn't respond immediately. I read everything carefully. There were over 30 messages. Some accusing me of ruining her life. Others saying we could still fix this if I admitted I panicked. One even said her husband was unstable and had planned this to isolate her. That was the moment I stopped feeling conflicted. There was no accountability anywhere in her words. Not a single sentence that acknowledged what she had done. It was all positioning. I sent one final message. Short. Direct. I told her I had spoken to her husband before the divorce was served. I told her I had seen the therapy records. I told her I was no longer participating in any version of her narrative. Then I blocked her. Phone. Social media. Email. I didn't threaten. I didn't argue. I didn't insult her. I simply removed access. Within 10 minutes, she tried calling from a private number. I declined and blocked unknown callers. She emailed once from a secondary account. I forwarded it to her husband and then filtered her address to spam. That was it. No drawn-out goodbye. No final dramatic call. She had warned me months earlier that if things went wrong, she would say I manipulated her. Blocking her wasn't emotional. It was preventative. Her husband texted later that night. He said she had tried to accuse him of orchestrating a public humiliation. The guests had witnessed the envelope under the cake board. No yelling. No theatrics. Just silence and witnesses. He said she left the house after reading the first page. I expected to feel guilt. I didn't. I felt something closer to clarity. For the first time since meeting her, there was no spin in the air. The fallout was quieter than I expected. Over the next few weeks, her husband and I spoke a handful of times. Not constantly. Not like we suddenly became best friends. But there was a strange mutual respect there. We had both been positioned as villains in her private narratives. Me as the manipulative other man if things were exposed. Him as the inevitable cheater who deserved preemptive betrayal. Seeing how cleanly she pivoted after being served made it hard to ignore the pattern. He moved forward with the divorce without delay. No reconciliation talks. No dramatic attempts to salvage the marriage. He had already done months of therapy. The cake wasn't revenge. It was closure with documentation. Apparently, she tried to tell mutual friends that he had emotionally abused her and that I had pressured her into an affair. The problem for her was timing. There were screenshots. There were therapy records. There were witnesses at the birthday dinner. The story didn't hold up under even light scrutiny. That's the part she never accounted for. She assumed men wouldn't compare notes. A month after everything settled, her husband and I met for drinks. Neutral ground again. We didn't rehash every detail. We mostly talked about work, travel, normal life. At one point he said something simple. He said, "I don't think she believes all men are cheaters. I think she needs them to be." That made more sense than anything she ever told me. Because if all men are guilty by default, then she's never wrong. She's just reacting. I won't pretend I came out of this looking great. I knowingly participated in an affair. That's on me. I own that part. But I also didn't double down once I understood the full picture. I didn't let it drag into years of manipulation. Blocking her was the cleanest decision I made in the entire situation. Last I heard, she moved to another city. New job. New circle. I assume a new narrative. As for her husband and me, we're not bonded by trauma or anything dramatic. We're just two guys who compared timelines and refused to play roles in someone else's script. If there's a lesson here, it's this. When someone insists everyone else is guilty by nature, pay attention. Sometimes that belief is a confession.